Welcome back, everyone, to the Kriya Yoga Podcast. I'm here once again with Bryan Crigler. You heard from him, I think, 2 or 3 episodes ago, where he was interviewing me, specific questions on lifestyle and technique. So if you want to know the secrets of Jyoti Mudra, go back and listen to that. And also whether Kriya Yoga will ruin your relationships or not, we talked about that too. But anyway, welcome, Bryan. It's good to see you again.
Great to see you, Ryan.
Yeah. So Bryan is a Kriya Yoga meditation facilitator. He earned that, and he was given that certificate in November of 2025 on one of our advanced retreats. And essentially what a Kriya Yoga meditation facilitator is, this is a person who represents the Kriya Yoga tradition for the purpose of helping others to meditate better, to help teach others the preparatory practices for Kriya Yoga, and for really encouraging people along their path. So, Bryan, I'm curious, how did you come to where you are now? If you wouldn't mind telling people how you got here, that would be great
Sure.
as a start.
Yeah, absolutely. My path was a little bit long and curvy, but here we are. I started, I've always kind of been curious about, what's beyond our normal everyday existence in life, and from a very, very young age. I was reading a lot of, Carlos Castaneda books and that sort of thing when I was a young teen. And so I've always wanted to know what's more beyond this. And, I grew up Christian, going to Sunday school and stuff, but that didn't ever really stick with me. So I kind of went off and explored other things. And it brought me through a lot of different areas. I got deep into, the psychedelic world and did a lot of that sort of exploration, working with shamans in jungles and sitting in teepees and, doing all sorts of stuff like that, which was interesting, but didn't ultimately really lead me where I wanted to go. I actually found yoga through the movement practice, which I think a lot of people these days do. I got pretty heavy into martial arts for a long time, and it was tough on my body. And then I ended up trying yoga class, and the physical movement stuff really, really was impactful for me. So I went down that path pretty heavily for a while. Went through teacher training, so learned how to teach asana that way. But still, it wasn't satisfying my spiritual development. So I got deep into breath work and Pranayama, studied that for a long time. And then, of course, that led me right into meditation. And, I think I came into Kriya through Autobiography of a Yogi, which is also a common theme, I think. I became a card-carrying member of the Self-Realization Fellowship back in 2015.
Okay.
Just through correspondence. Back then they sent you actual paper. So I have a 3-ring binder full of, paper from them. But I didn't love that learning style. And so I went on through other things. I studied with Himalayan Institute for a while. And about 2019, 2020, somewhere in there, I discovered the Kriya Yoga Podcast. Mm-hmm. And really, really just resonated with your messaging, the way you approach these things, which is really kind of, really no fluff, no nonsense. Here it is. And I definitely resonate with that. And so I think I started studying more intensely with you in 2020 or 2021 or something like that. And, it's been nonstop ever since. And here we are.
Yeah. Did you ever think when you first heard the Kriya Yoga Podcast that you would be on the Kriya Yoga Podcast?
I don't know, actually. Maybe. I might have thought, hey, it'd be interesting to talk to that guy.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have necessarily, it's interesting. Here we are.
Yeah.
Funny.
Good. Well, what I wanted to talk to you about today that I thought might be helpful for our listeners, a number of things. I'd like to hear more about, your personal engagement in the practice and what worked for you to set up a successful practice. And, we'll get into this a little bit later. What do you feel that you've learned as you've developed your Kriya Yoga practice, and if you've been surprised by anything that you've learned. So that's kind of the gamut that I would like to look at today. Does that sound all right with you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So to get started, it sounds like you already had a pretty significant practice even before you became involved with the Kriya Yoga apprenticeship program and so on. Is that right?
Yes, but I would say that as far as a disciplined practice, it had kind of just begun. When I was studying with Himalayan Institute, that was a pretty disciplined practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through that. And so I did have that, but it was probably only a year and a half before I joined the apprenticeship program. So,
right. What did you find? What did you find helped you to be successful in your practice? And anything that comes to mind about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, for me personally, I mentioned I had a martial arts background. And so I learned discipline through that. And by the way, it wasn't something that I've always had,
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe anybody can develop tapas, to develop that discipline in their spiritual practice or anything. But I definitely applied that early on. So that was very useful. I think early on I was able to pick up Kriya pretty quickly because I had done a lot of work with pranic sensitivity prior to coming in. So I mentioned I did a lot of pranayama training and the ability to really sense and learn how to work with prana in my own body. Obviously, that lends very well to the Kriya practices. So that helped significantly as well. But again, these are things that anybody can learn. I think for me, what I love most about just yoga in general is that there is a guideline, there is a blueprint that's laid out, and all you have to do is follow that blueprint. You don't really have to take a lot on faith, and you get to go through this blueprint and have your own experiences and kind of be experimental about it and see what your experience is. And then when you have interesting things that happen, you can go to some of these texts and you can verify that, oh, yeah, okay, I've had that happen to me. What's really exciting for me is when I have an experience and then I read about it, so that it's not introduced into my consciousness. And that's happened to me, a few different times where I've had some experiences early on. And as I get more advanced in my training and I study different texts and the sutras and stuff, I'm like, oh, yeah, that I know what that is, So,
yeah, that's really an important part of it that I found too. Just what you said of when you have an experience and then you end up finding a book or you hear a teacher speak or something that says, "Oh yes, this is what is supposed to happen." Right? When it comes to you without you being prompted for it.
It's very encouraging, absolutely, and it instills a deeper faith in what we're doing, and that just kind of shows that these things work. It's good not to be attached, I think, to the fruits of the practice, but when you can see actual progress, it's very encouraging.
Yeah, right. So you talked about being able to feel the prana and having sensitivity to that. Over the years, clearly I found that to be extremely important because when you can actually feel the process, then you're more inspired to do it more often because you can actually feel the movement of prana. You can feel yourself pulled more inward. So when it came to your development through understanding of pranayama and your exploration of pranayama, is there any principle or idea that you could offer to people to help them gain a little more access to that, that feeling response with their breath and with prana and so on?
Sure, absolutely. I think for me, there was a couple different exercises that really helped me connect with it. Part of it is just body awareness, being able to just sense different parts of your body. And those are very simple exercises. And I mean, people listening right now, you can look at the back of your hand and most people then can sense, feel the sensation on the back of their hand, even if it's the air touching it or something like that. If you close your eyes and you're not looking at it, you can still sense the back of your hand. And to me, that sensing is starting to sense prana. So you can start there with different parts of the body. And then you can start to, once you get good at sensing prana static in the body, you can start to connect to a flow of awareness, right? So usually it's easiest to do with the movement of the breath, in my experience. But you might find a couple points in the body, say the tip of the nose and the eyebrows, and you just sense the movement first of the physical breath going between those points. And then you can kind of sense beyond the physical breath. You can even feel the movement going up above your eyebrows towards the forehead, where the nasal cavity doesn't go. So if you're sensing a movement going up towards your forehead, you're not sensing physical air anymore. You're into the realm of prana. And so things like that, I think we can continuously do practices like this to help develop our pranic sensitivity. And once we do that, then of course, things like Sushumna breathing or the Kriya Pranayama become more accessible because we're working with the same energy.
Yeah. I remember when you gave a talk at the September retreat on pranayama, you mentioned that when you're breathing in through the nose and when you feel the breath kind of move up into between your eyebrows and up into your forehead, just what you said, that there's nothing up there that the breath is going towards. And so when you feel that, that's the sensation of prana. That's not the actual wind going through your nose.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're connecting not just with, feeling a static prana, but you're feeling a flow of prana.
Yeah.
So that's really useful, I think, especially for Kriya yogis.
Oh yeah. When I heard you say it, I thought, oh yeah, that's very, very helpful. With that though, in the advanced Kriya Yoga course, I do have a little section on there where we talk about using your imagination. Mm-hmm. So do you have any thoughts on when people are working with prana and they're feeling their body and they think to themselves, oh, well, that's just my imagination. How do we, I guess the first question would be, how do we discern the difference? And on the other side of it would be, how can we just engage our imagination to help us feel more fully into the prana of the body?
Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit, in the last podcast, but I think imagination, I think, is a useful tool because it can fill in the gaps, like when I'm working with people with Sushumna breathing, sometimes it's really difficult for people to access feeling movement through the spine because we have a very forward-facing awareness most of the time. We're not sensing our back body, we're sensing what's in front of us. So it adds an extra layer that we have to get through. But most people can sense the top of their head, and many people can sense kind of the root area, the perineum. Even if we're physically squeezing that area of the body, we can sense it. And so what I find is if you can feel those 2 points, then you can use your imagination to connect the dots, right? And so if we're trying to sense the movement of the breath coming from the root up to the crown, we can start by just feeling the root and then imagining the breath moving up the spine and then actually sensing the crown at the top of the breath, and then vice versa on the way down. And eventually what happens is that imagining becomes a real sensation of the movement, because those points slowly start to come together with real sensation of prana. That's been my experience working with people in that way. But I think it can be useful, absolutely, and I think it can run away from you too.
Right. Well, I remember, by the way, Bryan, it helped a bit with the book, Becoming a Kriya Yoga Teacher, the guidebook for Kriya Yoga representatives. He did was it the 6-week outline that you did for that? Yeah. He did a 6-week class. And I said, oh, well, can I just use your outline? Because it's got all the stuff that it needs. And you talk about that in there of on the inhale, feeling one part of it. And I think is it the crown? So you inhale and then you feel the crown. And then on the exhale, you focus on feeling the root. Is that the direction that it went?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And so each time you're not necessarily getting caught up in what's moving through the spine. You're just feeling the points at the bottom and the top of each breath. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that seemed extremely helpful.
It can be useful because I think a lot of people struggle with that, and then they feel like there's something wrong with them, but there's not. It's just developing a skill like anything else. Learning to sense prana is really a body awareness, because that's another thing that we don't all have a lot of access to. We're very mental right now at this time in history, and we're always thinking and looking at screens, and very rarely are we reflecting back, even just sense our body. And so I think starting to do that, I think it's also simpler than we think. We like to overcomplicate things, right? So literally, if I'm sensing the back of my hand, I'm sensing prana. Yes, it can be that simple, and I think once you accept that, oh, okay, I'm just sensing through the body as a way to connect with prana, then a lot opens up.
Yeah, I think it's really a key to quite a lot. Even when we think about like Samkhya philosophy and why did that fall out of fashion? Well, one of the reasons is because in order to really understand it, you have to be able to feel your body, because you start with feeling the elements.
Yeah.
And if you can't feel the body, if you can't feel the elements, well, then none of the rest of it's going to make any sense.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as you've been practicing and as you've been studying, I'm curious, have you come across any frustrations or obstacles, and how did you work through those?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, continuously. And I think that's part of the path. We hit plateaus, we hit hurdles. Sometimes we step backwards. We might be really able to focus in our awareness on one thing for a long time, get to deep states of consciousness, and then suddenly 1 week or even 1 month, we can't stop thinking about work or relationship or a stupid song that just won't leave your head every time you sit down to meditate. That happens to everybody, I think.
Right.
For me, one thing that's been useful in getting through that has been to start to change my mindset around expectations of my practice. I think it's very easy to want to finish something. We're taught in our society to start a task and finish it, and to kind of grind and get through things. And I don't think we can view our meditation practice that way. It doesn't really work like that. I think instead, a better approach is to view each practice with a sense of curiosity, and to kind of sit down, and instead of saying, I'm going north today, you can say, this road I know probably goes north, but I'm going to see where it leads, And when we do that, it allows us to just be present with whatever the experience is, instead of being frustrated that we're not having a certain experience.
Right.
If we sit down and expect to see fireworks behind our eyelids every time to sit down, we're going to be frustrated 9 times out of 10 practices, which then is going to get in the way, and it's going to cause us to stall or go backwards, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that, you came to the path. You've always been interested in, I guess, other ways of understanding things. A lot of us reach this path that way. You had mentioned that you had done like work with shamans in the jungle and so on.
Yeah.
And one of the funniest things I heard, it made me laugh quite a bit, and it still makes me laugh, is I was listening to one of your recordings when you were guiding the 12-week introduction course, and you said something like, if you're looking for, I think you said, like, peak experiences all the time, there's a shaman in the jungle with a bowl full of ayahuasca for you, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, personally, I have no issue with psychedelics or plant medicine. I'm not prejudiced against it in any way, as you might imagine. But I personally don't feel that it's that useful when it comes to your yoga practice. So I could probably quote a few reasons why, say from the Yoga Sutras, even though the Yoga Sutra says, well, using herbs, you can experience samadhi. Well, there's some other stuff we need to know about the Yoga Sutras before we can make that jump. Yeah. But from your experience, what do you feel the difference is between, say, your meditation practice, your yoga practice, and the relevance of psychedelics and so on? I'm just kind of curious.
Sure. Yeah. I wouldn't change anything. I think it was all useful for me. But I did gain some valuable, I think, insights from time to time. A lot of it was confusing. Some of it was scary. Some of it was just entertaining, and some of it was useful. But I think what eventually drew me away from it was, well, first of all, was I didn't feel called to it anymore after a while. But second, these are all very peak experiences. I don't think you'll talk to anybody who does psychedelics that says it wasn't that way. It's very intense, most of the time. But what you bring back from it, sometimes is useful, sometimes it's not useful at all. And then reintegrating after that experience, I think, is what gets in the way for a lot of people. There's not a lot of reintegration from those experiences. And so I've met a lot of folks along, especially during those days, that would just keep going back again and again and again. And many were very ungrounded, I'll just say that. And I don't think it was really doing a lot of good. I think it can be very useful, especially for breaking through, big traumas. As long as it's done in the right environment with the right guides. Because there's also, it can be very dangerous if you're with the wrong people or you're not doing it in the right setting. That's all super important. So I think it can be useful. But as far as for spiritual development goes, I think the better path is the steady path. Because I don't want to be reliant on a substance to connect with God. And I don't need to now. I have that access directly, and we all do. We don't need priests, and we don't need psychedelics. We just need to learn how to calm down enough and to surrender enough to reconnect with what we are already a part of. Right. So I think for me, it's much more useful to establish a daily practice, and not just on a cushion, but to really change your lifestyle to kind of support that. And it's very profound when that stuff starts to set in and you can kind of step back from, the whirlwind of society and be like, oh, okay, that's right. We're all going to die someday. And this is all what's really important. And I'm going to do that.
Right. Yeah. Good. Yeah. I just wanted to get your perspective because people don't seem to believe me when I tell them.
Yeah, well, everyone's got to do their own path, and it's not always the easy way, unfortunately.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I mean, a lot of my experiences with psychedelics, well, I personally never did them in a ritualistic setting. Even when I was not doing it in a ritualistic setting, I was always like, my God is everywhere. Yeah. so I can see that. And, what you mentioned about trauma, I think that's also important because personally, I've also used like mushrooms and so on in counseling situations that kind of helped have breakthroughs, but it was done with someone who is skilled in that, which made it very effective, so.
Yeah, very important. I've come out of psychedelic experiences with the wrong people in the wrong environments with more trauma than I went into them with. Right. So that's also a danger to consider.
Yeah. Well, good. And I'm curious. So as you've been learning and as you've kind of moved through these stages of your spiritual development, spiritual growth, what do you feel that what are some of the most important things you've learned by participating in the spiritual path?
That's a big question. A lot of those things.
Well, the top two, maybe.
Top two.
Yeah.
That I've learned.
Yeah.
Well, probably one of the more profound and useful things I've learned is that you can't force your way into these things. You can't use your will to force a spiritual experience. It's more about surrendering and letting go of, attachment, letting go of the physical into more and more subtle states. And it's really more of just a surrender than a force, and that's been a very profound lesson for me. Because prior to that, I wanted to make things happen, and it just doesn't work in my experience in deeper states of meditation. You have to have an intention, but then you have to just kind of gently surrender into that path. You can't, rhinoceros plow your way into a state of samadhi.
Right.
So I think that's very useful. And again, that's a change of mindset. And the other thing is, for me, it's been useful to just continuously be disciplined and doing the practice every day, whether or not I feel like it. I think at first it's changed through the years. So that's been interesting. At first it was I had to do it, I made myself do it. I treated it like brushing my teeth. I just did it, and some things were useful for that. I recommend, especially people that are just starting to establish a practice, to get some kind of app or something that tracks your progress so you can see your streaks. As silly as it sounds, if you have a streak going for a number of days, that not wanting to break it is a little bit of extra motivation to sit down and do it,
Yeah.
So if you don't have an hour to sit, you figure it out what you can. Maybe it's just half an hour, maybe it's 10 minutes, right? You do it every day. I think that's important. But what was interesting for me is eventually it just became so enjoyable that I just wanted to do it. And it stopped being the discipline of I have to do this every day to I get to do this now. This is like, I look forward to this as an enjoyable experience. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And with the idea of the surrender, how do you balance the surrender part with the fact that you still sometimes need to make yourself do it?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it goes back to the mindset of the practice, right? So yes, I have to make some days I still have to make myself do it. That's true. But when I sit down to do it, then I just shift into another mode and I look at what this practice needs to be. And part of that surrendering is allowing whatever needs to happen, right? So letting go of this expectation of, one day I might have a super deep Bhutajaya practice where I'm merged in space, and then experiencing Ishvara Pranidhana, and I don't want to come out of it,
Mm-hmm.
And the next day I might not be able to get close to that because something else happened in my day or my life, or I'm tired or something's happening. But rather than getting frustrated about it, just sitting with what needs to happen, if there's a tightness in my throat, sitting and just sensing that tightness in my throat. So allowing each practice to kind of be what it needs to be, having a goal and an intention and a plan, but being okay with abandoning that plan, I think is part of that surrendering process,
Yeah. Have you found that as you've kind of become more skillful as well as more surrendered, that the experience within the time that you spend meditating and so on, that those experiences, even though they're not, you don't want to define yourself by, oh, I had a wonderful experience yesterday, today's just kind of okay. Have you found that generally, though, the baseline of the experience becomes pretty consistent in your ability to, do you understand what I'm asking?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's been the case. I mean, when I first started meditating, it was just about even learning to understand, to feel pranic sensitivity. I mean, that was a whole thing, right? And then just being able to sit comfortably for a period of time without my body being a big distraction. That was a whole path, So there's all these benchmarks that you hit, but once you get those things figured out and you start to dial in and you learn to hear Om, one day suddenly you can hear it, and you're like, oh, that's what I've heard that for a long time. That's what that is, For me, once I was able to establish sort of those things, then my baseline for my practice continuously went up, right? So, when I say take step backwards, I don't start back from zero. I'm still able to sit down and listen to Om and fall into a deep state pretty quickly. I just might not be able to sustain it as long from day to day.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. I think nowadays I can sit down and sometimes, I'd still go through all the techniques that I'm using, but I don't always have to, I can sit down and just listen to Om and get into it.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing for people to keep in mind, is that you can reach that ability to where, just like if you're a good musician, even on your bad days, you can still play the song.
Totally.
You know, and just to keep that in mind, you know, because when you are engaged in a process and it's working well, that is what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I'm curious, because sometimes I've been surprised myself about things that I've learned. Is there anything during your practice, during your time exploring these things, is there anything that has surprised you? Like anything that you've learned spiritually speaking, or anything that you feel was a realization about life that now you go, huh, never really thought I'd think or feel that.
Yeah, there's probably been a few. There's a couple that come to mind right away that are actually pretty connected. You know, one thing that was a little bit of a surprise for me was, especially when I started getting into able to relax into more and more subtle states and getting into things like the Bujujaya and all that sort of thing. The way that it felt was very enjoyable.
Mm.
You know, it was pleasant, and to the point where I don't often want to stop meditating, you know, and so I'm to the point where I can sit for a few hours, not because I'm forcing myself to, but because I'm enjoying the experience. And if I think back to when I first started meditating, that wasn't really something that I was imagining, you know, but as a result of that enjoyment of the practice, other things in my life have changed. You know, I talked about this at some point in the past, but, you know, I used to have, just growing up in the Midwest, you know, not a super healthy relationship with substances, you know, alcohol especially, and that sort of thing. And because my practice was so enjoyable, that stuff just fell away. You know, it wasn't, I need to be a good yogi, and so I need to stop drinking. It was, I really enjoy these states that I'm in. And I know that when I have a few beers, it makes my body feel this certain way, and it makes it a lot harder to get into these states. And it was just a natural thing, you know, where it just kind of fell away. And that was a surprise to me, you know, because I thought it would have to be something that I worked harder to do.
Right.
And I remember who it was. I've heard you talk about it before, where, you know, somebody asked, I think they asked Yogananda if they have to give up smoking and drinking and that sort of thing. He said, no, but I can't guarantee you won't want to, you know,
Right.
if I remember that correctly. Was that
Yeah, that's right. No, yeah, I believe it was Yogananda. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's absolutely happened with me, you know,
Right.
and it's been amazing. Beyond that, I mean, of course, these practices aren't just on the mat, they bleed out into our lives, especially if we're really trying to walk the path and live by the Yamas and Nyamas. And, you know, I definitely have noticed a difference in the way that I interact with people, you know. I'm still working on the closest relationships, you know, conversations with family and stuff like that are sometimes triggering, and you know, I'm not quite there yet. But as far as like interacting with the general public, it's quite different for me, you know, than it used to be. So
Yeah. I mean, you know, when it comes to family, I think everyone has situations that people aren't necessarily in alignment with the folks around them. And I remember Mr. Davis one time. I was probably in my 20s, and I was having a bit of an issue because I had to make a little bit of a lifestyle change, and I knew it was going to upset my family. And absolutely, you know, my Italian side of the family went all dramatic, and I didn't know what to do. And I talked to Roy, and he said, be too busy. He's something like, be too busy to have to spend too much time with them in that drama, or something like that. So that was his advice. I don't know if that would work for you though.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not a uncommon. Like Ram Dass said, if you wanted to see how spiritually evolved you were, go spend Thanksgiving with your family. You know, see how long it takes you to revert back to your old trigger habits, and you know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they definitely can bring it out because those patterns run deep in your chitta. But I think also it's important to remember that, they represent they represent a certain time of your life. And so, astrologically, when we think about that, we were born into the family that has all the triggers, that has all the patterns, that has everything that we are sensitive to, that we need to work through. But that was representative of when we were born. Mm-hmm. And so as we start practicing Kriya Yoga, meditation, being more conscious and so on, we actually change. And if they're not changing, the issue is there's really nothing wrong with them, nor is there anything wrong with you. It's just that they represent a time or place in your own development, and you're just not there anymore. And I think that's what makes it so hard to think, oh, well, I must sustain the same thing, or I must be more compassionate, or yeah, be more compassionate, be kind to people and so on. But we don't have to judge ourselves because we can't make it work, because maybe we're not supposed to make it work anymore. I mean, that's just a thought.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows?
For everybody's situation,
Yeah. Yeah. Good. So I'm curious, a few more questions for you. How have you handled, though, those changes when maybe you don't want to engage in the same way with people? How have you been able to kind of navigate that successfully or not successfully? And what have you learned from that?
Well, some relationships I just let go, and I just have said, okay, this isn't serving either of us anymore, and just let it go, not in an angry way or anything, just kind of moved on. In others, though, I've probably become more silent, rather than engaging in something, I might just keep quiet, and move on. And so that's been interesting and useful. And I think silence is powerful. I think we tend to talk a lot, and some of us talk too much to where we, are externalizing all of our thoughts. And some people are just wired that way. So, no shame. But I do feel like, it's important to be aware of what we're speaking. I think of like the four gates of speech, right? I've heard that. And for people that aren't familiar, it's, before you say anything, first of all, is it going to be kind? Is it going to be necessary? Is it the right time to say it? And what's the fourth one? Is it the right time? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And
let's see. It's in the book here.
You have it in that book? You heard me talking about it. I'm on the spot. I forgot it.
That's all right. I know it's in here somewhere. So let's see.
Oh, is it true? I'm sorry.
Oh, is it true? That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Those are the four. Is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it the right time?
Is it the right time? Right.
And so I think being more aware of what we're speaking is important, because it's very, very easy to just get down a road of unuseful conversation, especially if somebody's trying to bait you into a political conversation or something like that.
Right.
Don't take the bait.
Yeah.
You don't have to be mean, though. That's the thing is, can be kind with our silence. We don't have to be stern and angry all the time. So. Right.
Yeah. I think it was Yogananda. Someone had told Yogananda that they just couldn't get their mind to be quiet when they meditated. And Yogananda said, it's because you talk too much. He said, stop talking so much and you'll find that your mind will become calmer. So I think that's pretty good.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because we have internal dialogue too, although apparently not everyone has that, but many of us have an internal dialogue that goes on all the time.
Where did you hear that some other people don't have that?
Oh, Instagram or something.
Oh, okay.
But it's been a recent thing where people are like, wait, you have a voice that goes in your head all the time? I'm like, yeah.
I'm going to have to pay attention to that now. I've never really thought about it. Yeah. Do you have one?
I have an inner narrator. Absolutely. Yeah. It's not constantly going, but, I might think to myself,
Huh.
Apparently not everyone does that. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to have to pay attention to that because I would assume that I had one because I feel like I do talk to myself a lot, but I don't remember what the voice sounds like. Anyway, That's good. Well, one final thing I'd like to see how you have worked with this and what your thoughts are on it. Um, we put a lot of emphasis on the yamas and niyamas. We're just talking about truthfulness and so on. A lot of people treat the yamas and niyamas as though they're like this moral code, this dogma that they have to follow. And I mean, I'll admit, when I first became involved in yoga, that's how I treated it. I thought, oh, well, when I was Catholic, I had the 10 Commandments, and now I've got the yamas and the niyamas. Great. I'm curious, do you find them to be that way? Or just what is your sense of the yamas and niyamas as it relates to the yoga practice and so on?
Yeah, I think it's going to be different for everybody. I feel like it's pretty common that we have to kind of force initially some of them, but it depends on your disposition, depends on how you were raised, how you're accustomed to interacting with people and talking to yourself. There's a whole spectrum there. For me personally, some of them were just no problem, were things that are like, satya, right? I generally wasn't lying. It wasn't a big deal for me.
Right.
Some people it is, and not even malicious lies, but just like white lies to make people feel better. I mean, it's still not telling the truth, right? So we had to work towards them. Non-harm, I feel like those were all pretty natural for me. But the yamas and nyamas also have lots of layers, right? It's so you have the first, like non-harm, for example. I'm not going to go and punch my neighbor because I'm angry at him, right? Obviously. But then there's the verbal harm and the psychological harm and, emotional harm that we can do to people that sometimes is much worse than getting in the face, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's pretty common initially for us to have to be more disciplined about how we're engaging with the world and looking at the yamas and niyamas that way. But then I think it just kind of naturally it just makes sense, and they all seem to feed one another and work within one another. And so when you get good at working on one, you seem to automatically be doing some of the other ones. They're all kind of interconnected that way. So I feel like as we give more attention to it, it becomes more effortless. But I think initially it is a little bit of, we have to consciously try to work through some of these things. That's been my experience.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point there about telling like little white lies to maybe keep people happy or something like that. I think it's important to remember that the yamas and niyamas, if we can't do them well, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. There could be a very good reason why you don't feel safe enough to just telling the truth.
Right.
Or you could behave in a way that is harmful because you don't know any other way. It's not because you are a terrible person. It's just for whatever reason, you don't know any other way right now.
Absolutely.
And that's just something that we grow through. How have they impacted your inner meditation practice, though? Because some people, I think I was reading a Reddit thread one time where people were kind of arguing over that we don't need the yamas and niyamas, that if we just do our practice and our techniques, that's all that we need. But I mean, I felt that they've really helped with the deeper process. So I'm curious, what has your experience been with that?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I know you're a fan of Ramana Maharshi, right? So if you can connect with the self and get deep into that, probably they're all going to be natural. You're not going to need to strive much for them, but most of us aren't there.
Right.
That's just not our experience. I think the usefulness, especially when you're starting to meditate, of the yamas and niyamas is that they help you create less drama in your external life. Because when we have a lot of drama in our life, that's what comes up when you first start to sit down and be still and close your eyes. That's what's flooding your consciousness. So if we can gradually not get in as much trouble, I guess you could say externally, not create so much drama by hurting people and lying to people and having all these things to worry about, stealing from people, then I think our meditation becomes a little easier to find stillness, to still those vrittis, because there aren't as many of them that we're creating. So I think it's very useful from that perspective.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, that's the extent of the questions I had today. So thank you for being here and answering them for us.
Yeah, awesome to chat with you. Appreciate it.
Again, Bryan is a Kriya Yoga meditation facilitator. In the 25 years I've been practicing Kriya Yoga, I work with people from time to time to represent the lineage, and he is one of two people who's survived my tyrannical expectations. him and Donnell Mason. So those of you who couldn't see, I namaste bowed to Bryan. But Bryan, you will be doing another study group for the 12-week introduction course. Is that right? Coming up sometime soon?
Yeah, I'm hoping to start in March, beginning of March. So probably on Tuesday evenings, about 5:30 Central, starting that first Tuesday in March for 12 weeks. So depending on when this comes out, would love to have you join us.
Yeah, I think it'll be in February, so people will hear about it before then. And what we're talking about is at Kriya Yoga Online, we have a 12-week introduction to Kriya Yoga for meditation and spiritual growth. And it is an online course, and I lead the sessions through the videos. But what Bryan does is once a week you meet with him. And would you like to talk about what happens during those sessions?
Yes, so we'll do a little recap of kind of review of the video of the week, but more so it's an opportunity to talk through any questions or experiences that people are having along the way pertaining to that week. And then we'll actually go through and do meditation techniques that are described every week for 12 weeks. So a kind of opportunity to practice with a little group in person, not in person, over video, live,
Yeah, good. Yeah, excellent. And Bryan is a wonderful facilitator. I haven't been able to attend any of his offerings. I do listen to the recordings, and I've always enjoyed them. And your website it's kriyayogamidwest.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, kriyayogamidwest.com is where we'll post those, and I'm sure we can find them via Kriya Yoga Online as well, maybe.
Yeah. And through your website, you have contact information if people need to get in touch with you if they have questions or anything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat.
All right. Well, good, Bryan. It's wonderful to see you. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Kriya Yoga Podcast. To learn more about Kriya Yoga meditation, you can visit us at kriyayogaonline.com, where you can find information about current book releases, online classes, and in-person retreats throughout the year. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, visit us at the Kriya Yoga Online Patreon community at patreon.com/Kriya Yoga.
Pataye